How you guys doing? It's a pretty nice night here. Maybe not quite night yet. Evening. Still a little bit of light left. For Vote 115, Shammai used to say, make your study of the Torah a fixed practice. Speak little, but do much, and receive all men with a pleasant countenance. Rabban Gamliel, I should say, this is 116. Rabban Gamliel used to say, appoint for thyself a teacher, avoid doubt, and do not make a habit of tithing by guesswork. I've tried to make my study a fixed practice lately. At least, the time fluctuates. Sometimes it's a lot more. Sometimes it's less. But I try to make it every day and night. You guys clean your gutters lately? I've been putting it off since probably sometime late last fall. I think I cleaned most of them somewhere in the summer when everything was dry and crusty. Then they get a little dirty in the fall, but really not a whole lot. The leaves really don't finish dropping here until I don't know, somewhere in the middle of November or something like that. Maybe a little later. Maybe even December. I can't recall precisely, but it's definitely way into the muck season where it's wet and cold, and the person really doesn't want to get up on a ladder out in the freezing rain or cold rain, depending on the specific day. But then they accumulate all kinds of other junk in the late winter and early spring, like I guess one of the things that drops over the winter and late fall is the the maple maple seeds. There's just a million, maybe not quite that many, but a big maple tree definitely has a lot. Probably at least like in the tens of thousands of seeds that drop every year. And then cherry blossoms and pollen. I think generally the pollen's only every couple of years because the I think at least some of the pines and conifers only take 2 years to produce seed. They I think they drop pollen and fertilize the seed 1 year, and then it takes another year to develop. This year trees dropped a lot of pollen. There's just slimy goo everywhere. Everywhere it's wet anyway. I think I cleaned maybe 40 feet of gutter or something like that. 30 feet. Somewhere, give or take. I'm seriously out of shape. I was wondering what tweaked my arm so bad this morning. I was thinking it was just moving the ladder around and cleaning the gutter, but I forgot I made cookies yesterday. I think that was what probably did it. That and trying to rip a piece of duct tape off a box. Probably both. But gutters, slimy clogged gutters really just stink like a rotten sewer. There's no other way to put it. They just smell horrible. I didn't realize how I mean, I was up there and smelled it. I know it smelled bad, but I tried to wash my hands, and it took like 3 times of scrubbing them to get the stench off to where I could eat. It was just putrid. It makes a person wonder how just like decaying plant matter can smell like a sewer. It's all that stuff that all those little organisms that break down the plant matter, or waste of any kind, I should say, that actually cause the smell. That's like the whatever whatever their consumption process is. It's part of the cycle of life. I've been thinking about waste lately. Seeing the maple seeds in there. I mean, the downspout ends of the gutters all had just gobs of sprouted maple starts. You could start a tree farm from the starts in the gutter. Each downspout must have had like at least, I don't know, 30 or 40 maple tree sprouts stuck in around each mesh deal to keep the downspouts clean. Well, the photo in the thumbnail, you can't even see all of them because they're like buried in the muck. That bucket has like, and that was like half of it, maybe a little more than half, 2/3. But most of them are all buried. That bucket probably had like at least 100 or more maple starts in there. Unfortunately, I don't have the space to even really start that many, let alone a place to put them once they get very big. That fig that I tried to save last year from a sucker, I wasn't paying attention this late in the winter. I thought the frost was gone, or it definitely wasn't. So I got lazy and I left it out of the greenhouse, and it frosted twice, and pretty sure it killed it. But the hazelnut is doing really well, and of course the maples are. That's one thing about wasting seed is, even though a maple tree produces a full-size maple produces like tens of thousands of seeds every year. And most of them just sprout and die or get mowed over. Or just blow in the wind and decompose over the next year or two. They still, plants and animals can't really waste seed, because all they do is what their nature is, what they're programmed to do. They fulfill their purpose, and whatever lives and dies is God's will. It's a mitzvah from the Torah to be to not be wasteful. With pretty much anything, as long as it's as long as it's possible to not waste anything. For a long time, I always had an inclination to not waste food and certain things. Not like I'm sure most people probably think I'm like a cheapskate hippie weirdo, like reuse plastic bags and pieces of tin foil. Like if it's still usable again, and it's not totally gross or ripped to shreds, I usually try to reuse stuff. I definitely haven't made the most out of certain things. I've had to throw away some or compost some. Or I guess I shouldn't say had. I did. I composted three cabbage plants a few days ago that were starting. One of them was starting to bolt, and I looked at the other two, and they had they had some bugs in them, so I figured I was going to be lazy and not go through them and clean them out and use them. Tried to use most of the other ones, so like I cut down about I can't remember, maybe six or seven of them over last month, and I think I got about 3 gallons worth of chopped cabbage. They didn't head out, so it was kind of weird. They were like colored, like half of them were colored. I got half were a variety called, I think, January King, and the other ones were I think it was either Red Express or Red Rock. I can't remember. Some kind of purple variety, red or purple cabbage. But since they didn't head out, they just were kind of open, and the leaves were more green. So when everything got cut up and cooked, it cooked up more like kind of like collard greens, or like a kind of like a cross between collards and cabbage. It was really good though. Today I roasted some of the cabbage with the second to last batch of sweet potatoes I have, and a few potatoes. Man, they were so good. Real food is just so amazing to eat. This week was the first time I really cooked anything substantial for a while. I made meatloaf earlier in the week. It was just so wonderful. All the stuff I had been eating was really not that great for like dinner and lunch. Lots of pizza, or some other kind of semi-prepared food, or like roasted chicken, and not very many vegetables. So it was really awesome to eat really good food. When I first took a bite of the meatloaf, it was like the first thought I had was, man, this is better than eating those cookies. It was like the best thing in the world. I was really hungry and feeling really drained before I ate dinner, after I cooked the meatloaf. How are you doing, BB? Reverend Mizraki made a comment about liberals, and well, in general, I agree with what he said. I think there's always something that I mean, what he said was, the any position or idea that a liberal has is always going to be the opposite of the Torah, the opposite of what any person that wants to be righteous should think like or agree with. And that's definitely true for the most part. But there was there was something in the comment that just seemed slightly off. Not that it wasn't true, just that there's, no matter who a person is, almost everyone has some, even the most wrong people in the world, most of them still have something that they latch onto that is, you know, that is good in the eyes of the Torah. It's just how they choose to, whatever it is for one, and then how they choose to like put that mitzvah into practice. Like a lot of liberals really love, saving the environment and not being wasteful. At least, that's what they claim. But it's mostly like applied to tell other people what they should be doing and make themselves feel good about, who they are because they recycle or, or they drive a Prius or whatever, or their Patagonia down, $300 down jacket is made with 70% post-consumer recyclable materials or whatever. Or that they're going to go save the whales, or prevent global warming, which are two of the most ridiculous concepts for anyone that really, really understands, what this place, what creation is and how God works, and especially if they listen to enough, honest rabbis for long enough. God runs the world, people don't. I mean, of course, it's our responsibility to do our effort to not be wasteful and to not just go around murdering stuff for no reason, just, out of some twisted, delusional, perception of what they think the Torah says of to be fruitful and multiply and dominate the earth. It's not for people to like go everywhere and just shred the hell out of it for whatever physical gain that they can get at any and all costs. Especially not mass murdering hundreds of thousands of millions of people that they perceive as savage heathens, which is ultimately ironic because in the eyes of the Torah, I'm not sure if at the very least there's much difference, and at most they may have actually been better people. Because they both worshipped idols, at least for the most part. everyone likes to look in there and see. Not, I shouldn't say see. They like to look in the Torah and find whatever validates what they want, and then twist it. I'm sorry, everyone's not correct. A lot of people look in the Torah and think they find something that validates, whatever they're doing, or they're, whether they even acknowledge it consciously or not, to fulfill their own desires. I can't imagine how how hard it would be to get the stench off. Actually, working in a literal sewer, where that kind of smell that was in the gutter was like on all parts of your skin and your hair and your clothes. Like what kind of shower you'd have to take before you went inside your house. A person can find so many lessons in everything in life. The person doesn't clean the gutters out, the gutters of their mind and their soul and their actions. Frequently, they get backed up and they start to rot, and it just stinks. And they gotta wade elbow deep in, or maybe not elbow, but wrist deep in muck, and the stench and gunk gets splattered everywhere. And then you gotta scrub to get all that smell off. I'm pretty good. I'm feeling terrified yet amazingly blessed. Just praying that I cannot screw it up, or that I don't screw it up. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Or parnasah, or is living. Smells are pretty amazing, though. A while ago, I watched a lecture from Rabbi Alon Anava. I think that's who it was. I'm sorry if that's not correct, but that's probably about as good as my memory can get in the moment. Right? He was talking about smells. And how powerful smells are. Yeah, it was Rav Alnaba, because he was talking about the weekly parasha that is going to be read either next week or the week after, maybe. I can't recall what it is, but it's Vayikra, somewhere around 18, I think, Leviticus, where they talk about the incense. And he goes over all the things that make up the incense, and it's like there's like four main components, and there's more, but the four main ones that are only those are the only ones that are listed in the written Torah. The rest are from the oral tradition. But they all, there's three of them that just don't really have much of a smell. And there's a third that just kind of smells really horrible. But somehow you mix it all together. And when the Kohanim would burn it in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, it would make the most amazing aroma. It was said that you could smell it everywhere in Jerusalem. And it smelled so great that women there didn't need to wear perfume. The whole thing about, the whole reason for the sacrifices, at least the ones that people bring, it wasn't like God, wanted people to slaughter and burn animals because he got, just because like that was what he wanted specifically, and that's it. The whole thing was so that people went through an ordeal that was costly, like financially, with their effort and their time, and was, also kind of humiliating, so that they would remember the sins that they committed, through all their effort that they had to, like, I gotta take either a cow or a goat that I have, or if I'm really poor, buy a couple doves or something. Whatever a person can afford. And then if you don't live in Jerusalem, make the journey there, which could take weeks, there and back. Lose all that time from, doing your regular job. And if you stood in line, everyone knew what you were there for based on what animals that you had. So if you had goats, everyone knew that you committed some kind of grave sin. So it was like pretty humiliating, which is all part of the process of teshuvah. But if a person did all that and didn't do teshuvah, all they did was waste their time and their money, because they got no, they weren't cleansed without doing teshuvah. It says it numerous times in the Tanakh that he doesn't want sacrifices. He wants people's hearts. What people People are stupid, and they have a really hard time with their memory being beat down by their arrogance. So if they don't have all these reminders of the last time that they failed, they won't have those things like in the front of their mind the next time they have an opportunity to make a sin. Like when there's some prostitute or immodest woman or something that they see around or cross paths with, and that was their transgression. They'll do a 180 and run the other way as soon as they realize that there's any remote chance that they could be in the vicinity to make the same sin again, or whatever else it is. Whether it's being around other people that gossip and speaking lashon hara. Or stealing. Or any other number of things. One interesting thing that I learned lately or recently that I didn't know before was what it really means by taking God's name in vain. And of course, it's obvious if you curse God, that's pretty clear. Well, that's totally different. Taking God's name in vain is much easier to do. Swearing a false oath, like swearing on God's name, is something that either isn't true or it's not necessary, and it's also saying God's name in a blessing that you don't need to or you shouldn't say. I wonder if that's one of the reasons why I never wanted to use any name for God. At least the last few years. I mean, the obvious reason was because the limited stuff that I did know creeped me out about what name that I possibly could say and what it might mean, especially being complete ignorant on Hebrew, or at least knowing just enough to know that I was ignorant, I guess. Well, there's a really good story, BB, if you're still here, about a guy traveling on a road. leaves home for headed to try to get somewhere. I can't remember. There's a couple different versions, maybe. But the guy leaves trying to go somewhere to like visit family and help them out or do some other good deed. And he's traveling on this road for a long time. Doesn't really matter if he's in a car or on foot or a horse or whatever. Whatever you would imagine a long time being. Hours, days, weeks, months. And he's walking, trying to hitch a ride or get a ride from someone that has a car or a horse or a carriage or something to get him there faster. And then finally someone picks him up after he's been walking for days. And they ask him where he's going, and he tells them. And the guy says, you're going in the wrong direction. And the guy says, no, didn't know that. So the guy stops and lets the guy off, and tells him he needs to turn back around and head the other way, and tells him how to get to where he's going. And there's a question. Was this guy closer to where he was when he didn't know, but he was going in the wrong direction? Or was he closer to where he wanted to be after he was physically further away, but he'd actually realized he was going in the wrong direction, and then knew how to get to where he wanted to go? A person could look at it like, they've wasted their entire life traveling in the wrong direction. Or from the perspective that, before you realized that you were going in the wrong direction, you thought you were pretty close. You thought you were almost there. But the reality was you were, the whole time, you were just running in the wrong direction. Or a person can look at it as now I have an idea, or at least a roadmap of how to get to where I wanted to go, years and decades ago, and not dwell on the past about things that you can't, like put the toothpaste back in the tube. You can't change the past. You can try to rectify certain things, but you know the only way forward is forward. It's in the future. And the only positive thing that a person can gain by looking at their past is to see what worked and what didn't. Just like going over stuff you learned. You don't want to just sit there and stare at it for the rest of your life because you know what it is. But you also don't want to forget. You don't want to go back there. So just every once in a while kind of look at it and say, well, that worked and that didn't, so I'll try to do more of that and less of that. And here I had no idea what I was doing, so I try to never do that again. At least not, until I find a better way to do it. See, for anyone that listens to this, you are extremely fortunate because you have the opportunity to follow the roadmap that God gave people. If you just, you just do it. But there's a lot of people that look at his map and twist it in all kinds of directions. There's only one compass a person can use, and that is just whatever being taught now or at any point in history, does it align with everything else in the tradition? If it doesn't at least, come from that line and stick close to it, at least, close enough to be identifiable to where it doesn't totally disagree with the core. Then it's true. But if it deviates from the Jewish sages, from the accepted commentary, from from the Oral Torah, from the Talmud, from any of the various accepted sages over the last 3,300 years, then it's not true. At first, it's going to be extremely difficult to know what that is, because when a person first starts, they know pretty much nothing that's correct, other than just being extremely fortunate to have some little glimpse of the truth granted to them. But it can't be taken into your heart and it can't be put into action without a person being humble. I was thinking about this the other day. Of course it's obvious that a person won't change their mind. They won't admit something else that counters their own beliefs as wrong without at least some kind of humility. It's an obvious kind of a psychological concept, but it's way more than that. God won't allow a person to see if they're arrogant, and that's really where it comes from. It's not that you have to admit that you're wrong to admit someone else is right. I mean, that's really not what it's about. A person has to admit that they're nothing. Over and over and over again. And they work really hard to try to stay that way as they learn. And only then will a person really get the assistance to see the truth. And of course, everyone's different. Everyone gets a different level of help, or has a different level of how deeply they accept the truth. And the Jews have a saying that's there's no mitzvah to be naive or to be a sucker or ignorant or whatever word a person wants to call it. It's good to have questions to delve into things, to not be a sucker, to toil over the truth, to finally to try to see for yourself what's really there. But there are certain things that are just beyond almost everyone's comprehension and wisdom, especially from the sages, because they're beyond most people. They had a lot of help, but only because they sacrificed everything for it. That's how it works, especially with the Torah. It works differently for like they say, the wisdoms of the Goyim. Like science and doctrine and murdering and stuff. Traveling outer space. With the wisdom of the Goyim, I think a lot of times there are certain people that have certain tests or merits, and God just gives them certain abilities to see what they'll do with to do with their gifts. what what kind of good or evil they'll do. But for the most part, the Torah is not like that. I mean, there are certain people that get more help with their learning than others, but there's no, like, as far as I'm aware, like a autistic savant of Torah. At least not the real deep learning. The only thing that matters is people learn as much as they can and put into practice whatever that is as best they can. And always do teshuva every day and every moment. Anytime they fail. I was thinking about mental illness the other day. If a person knows they have issues with, with what science calls mental illness or whatever, like anxiety or screwed up thoughts or behavioral issues, and worse things. There's one thing for sure: it's never going to get any better if you don't do something about it. And it's always best to be proactive. You don't turn and face whatever your problems are; they're just going to grow. Hopefully, if this applies to whoever's listening, hopefully it hasn't got to the point where you need to be severely medicated or something. But the only reason for any of that stuff to be necessary is when a person puts off what they know is wrong. No is not right. Put off doing something about it. I mean, I put off changing my own behavior for years just because I didn't want to. I mean, I knew in my heart all kinds of things that I did were just horrible, totally not healthy, not physically, not mentally, not spiritually. And I kept doing them for years and years and years and years. Finally, one day, something happened where some culmination of things that I had learned finally kind of clicked with the how screwed up I felt. And I finally decided that if I wanted to feel better, like really, get, not just feel better, but get better. The person's going to feel better for a few moments by just taking some kind of chemicals and numb the pain or numb, whatever suffering that they're going through. Get some, if not a moment of what they perceive as happiness, some kind of breathing room for a moment. But then, just like everything else is fake, it goes away. And reality comes crashing back down. There are certain things in life where a person's actions end up having severe and long-lasting effects that they have to deal with. And some things, can take a lifetime to try to rectify. I can tell you one thing for sure, no matter if a person is what society or the medical establishment considers a sane person, whatever that is, or they, or legally insane, or some some sliding scale between those 2 points, whatever or wherever they are. Certain things a person does will definitely only make things worse. Drugs and alcohol are definitely one of them. And while they're pretty severe as far as their negative impact on a person's mental state, but also physical and spiritual, spiritual state at least as much so as the mental state. There's also behaviors that are probably not close, not as bad as certain drugs, but possibly as bad or worse than other drugs. It just depends on, the behaviors and the drugs. Well, every person, has to look at their own actions and see what those behaviors are for them. I mean, I know there's some pretty clear-cut ones for me, which are arguing with people online, rage posting on forums, watching or reading or listening to the news, playing video games. Most of those are like, they all started out seeming like they were enjoyable, and then slowly over time, the more a person, the more I did them, and then definitely the more frequently I did them, and the more intensely I did them, the less enjoyment it was for me. And then it was just like a crack habit where it was like, I really hated it, but I just had to do it. And there was nothing really enjoyable. But for some reason, a person just can't stop. until they just grab themselves, you know, shake themselves awake and finally say, I've had enough. I'm not going to take it anymore. And rather than throwing a temper tantrum, actually do something constructive to make, you know, make things better, like really better. Like figure out how to stop doing those things. A person, you know, like I mentioned numerous times in other past streams, a person can't just stop doing evil and expect that it will continue. There's a constant void with a person's actions if they don't fill it with something, it will get filled. So if all you do is evil things and then you just stop doing evil, that's good, but it won't last. You have to fill the void with something good. What I started with was, you know, eating well and doing some kind of physical exercise and trying to replace the bad with some kind of good, at least from a secular, like science perspective. But that's pretty fake, also. I mean, it's not fake, but it's not really real. It's it's a band-aid for what's really wrong. There's a really good excuse me. There's a really good thing that the sages talk about. And the Rambam uses it in Hilkot Teshuvah about, you know, doing Teshuvah, and it's applicable to any, you know, not just sins, but any negative, unhealthy behavior. A person has to build a fence around whatever it is that's killing them, mentally, physically, or spiritually. And the fences have to be as high and as numerous as it takes to keep, you know, to keep yourself from whatever that you know, that person, that place, or that thing that keeps sucking you into the hole is. No one, I mean, there's, you know, to a certain extent, someone can build a fence for someone else, but that's a really temporary thing in a really limited capacity. For it to really last and have any long-term chance of success, a person has to build their own fences and then constantly shore them up. And then once you get some distance, once your hands have been scrubbed clean of the stench that you've been wrist deep in, once they finally don't smell like a sewer, always think of that stench or that uncomfortable, horrible feeling or whatever it is when you're wrist deep in filth. Keep it in the front of your mind. Anytime you have any kind of inclination to even remotely start inching your way back there. Hey Lee, how's it going? Yeah, it's I've been I still have really judgmental thoughts a lot of times, but not near as bad as they used to be. That's one thing that really made me connect with Rav Alon Anavas lectures was how he would talk about his thoughts. Like he was talking about himself years prior, about how he would make a say he wanted to stop committing or stop lying and stop doing all these things, and his wife and other people would be like, you don't lie, or you're you're a tzaddik, or you're righteous. And he was in his mind he's thinking, I am not. Other people may think that because my acts are mostly perceived as righteous, but who people really are is in their heads, and until until their thoughts in their heart, their until their Yetzirah Tov can overpower their Yetzirah to the point where they no longer have those kind of thoughts. It's there's still a long way to go, and that's how I've felt for the last at least a year. It's been, I imagine it's gonna be the rest of my life, but it's gonna take to get anywhere close to where I really want to be with my thinking, to where I don't think about any of those, any of those evil, wicked things. But if a person doesn't do their own self accounting, and if they're not aware of it, and they don't do their best to at least catch it when they are only thoughts and before they become actions, then they have no hope of ever not sinning with their acts. And the corrections that people get when they don't do the self accounting are always going to be a lot harder to deal with. because everyone has like a person has to do their own, do their effort, but everything, all their problems are their own fault. Mine and yours, whoever you are. Guns are weird. And that's one of the. I mean, there's so many like weird TV shows that are, like so true, but they're also just absolutely disgusting. Like people worship all kinds of weird things. People worship a man as God. They worship their own power or their own ego. They worship money. They worship sex. They worship guns or cars. Well, most people don't see it like that. They just think they're doing something that they enjoy. I mean, I guess not all people that worship a man as God. They they obviously see it as worship, but most of the other people, don't aren't that aware. Although everyone's blind in their own respect, including myself. Back to smells. the thing about that lecture that Rav Anava was given over about the incense. He said it was the reason why smells are so powerful, because it's either the only or one of the only senses that is still still has a connection to the soul. And he explains this as the source for this is in Bereshit, where Chava eats the fruit, or commits the sin by eating of the tree of good knowledge of good and evil. When she ate the fruit, she saw the tree, or she saw the fruit, and lusted after the fruit. And she touched the fruit when she picked it and ate it. And then she ate the fruit. So those three senses, a person's sight, their touch, and their taste, through that act, people lost that connection of physicality to the soul. People might still have the connection with sound, but I'm not sure. But we definitely do have with smells. That's why smells are so powerful. It's not good to have, to be around disgusting smells. If you can, if you can help it. It's also good to smell good smells, but real smells, not like some fake chemical air freshener or fabric softener sheets. That's one thing that just really gets my goat. There's this liquid laundry detergent in the house, and they're liars. That is for sure. It says unscented on the bottle, but as soon as I open it, it just, it obviously doesn't smell as bad as like, whatever fake like red or blue bottle that you buy at the store is advertised on TV. It's obviously not that bad, but it's still not unscented. Still smells like some fake French prostitute factory. But just, not really intense, just real light. Just a real light French prostitute factory. But there are so many people that like those horrible fake, like those tree car fresheners and bathroom aerosols and potpourri that older ladies buy. And all the disgusting, like anytime you buy like military gear from some guy, it's always been packed in like dryer sheets, so it just reeks. Personally, I think I'd probably rather have the mildew stench than fake dryer sheet smell. At least that's real. It may not smell pleasant, but it's not like the unpleasantness of fake goodness. Fake smells are like all the pretty much every pleasure in this world, even the ones that are even the ones that are natural from God. Just way more subtle. I mean, it's real in this world, but it's not. It's not really real. It's all extremely temporary. And other than a way to appreciate his wonder and his mercy and his infinite wisdom and awesome power. All it is a distraction from what's really important. There's a really good quote or a verse from Pirkei Avot I'm going to try to find that kind of relates to this. Pirkei Avot 2:7. Okay, I'm going to have to scroll back to find out who this sage was. It could be Hillel. I believe that's who this quote is from, or this verse in Pirkei Avot 2:7. He used to say, the more flesh, the more worms, the more property, the more anxiety, the more wives, the more witchcraft, the more female slaves, the more lewdness, the more slaves, the more robbery, but the more Torah, the more life, the more sitting in the company of scholars, the more wisdom, the more counsel, the more understanding, the more charity, the more peace. If one acquires a good name, he has acquired something for himself. If he acquires for himself knowledge of Torah, he has acquired life in the world to come. The first statement, the more flesh, the more worms, is kind of multifaceted. I think I know, or can recall two that I've learned. One is a to signify how a person should be cautious of physicality, of their physical desires. And when he's talking about more flesh, more worms, just like the sages say, when a man seeks to fill his stomach or something like that. They don't just mean his appetite for food. They mean a person's appetite for anything physical, any pleasure, whether it's food, drink, a woman, um, honor, any any physical pleasure or enjoyment other than from the Torah and observing its mitzvot. So the more a person enjoys this world, the more worms eat at them, and the kind of deeper thing. All right, I should fully elaborate on the first part. Is the more a person enjoys the physical aspects of this world, the harder it is to connect with God. The harder it is to fulfill His will and fulfill His Torah. And so while a person has to eat food and drink water and sleep to keep the body healthy, they have to do their effort. They should always be, aware of that. Those are the only reasons to do all those things is that so the body stays alive so that you can fulfill God's will. But otherwise, all you're doing is, is basically the dust of idol worship, where you worship yourself and your own physical desires. And it's all kind of like similar to wasting seed. Because wasting seed is when a person pleasures themselves. And if they eat just to eat, and if they sleep because it gives them physical enjoyment, longer than they need to rest and heal the mind and the body. And if they get drunk because they get enjoyment, or however temporary that may be, or they do drugs or whatever, it's just like just like pleasuring yourself, whether you're with a woman or you're by yourself, without the intent to be a vessel for Him to create new life in this world, or to bring new life into this world. But the deeper thing is that there's this process that the body goes through after it's in the grave. And it's said that to a certain extent, depending on how righteous or wicked a person was, they go through that suffering in the grave as the worms eat their flesh. So the more and I'm not sure if exactly like a physical suffering. I think it may be more of just a spiritual aspect, because it's all the connections to this world a person gets while they're here. Those all have to be severed in the process of going up to Shemayim, to leaving this world. And so the more they fulfill their own desires, the deeper the connection is that a person has. And if they don't try to sever those on their own, once they come to that realization, the process happens after they die. And the same process will happen when Mashiach comes. So people won't be dead. People will be, at least, the dead ones will be dead. But for anyone that's still alive, and merits to see it and not be destroyed. For anyone that's on the being saved side of the scale, for anyone that hasn't gone, as hardcore of refining themselves as they can to make that disconnect or make the connection to this world kind of as minimal as possible. That's going to be really rough when that happens. But there's always things a person has to keep in mind about all these concepts, and when trying to be righteous as best you can and fulfill the Torah, is to set reasonable, realistic goals. Like don't go from don't think you're going to go from like someone who is fully immersed in every aspect of physicality, like it's just like you're mainlining money and cars and women and food and alcohol and drugs like all day long for like 40 years, and then you're just going to stop overnight and become like Moshe or Rabbi Akiva. That's a recipe for failure. Just identify what you can reasonably do right now, and just slowly start shaving away the sins that a person commits, and the excess physical things. One thing to keep in mind when a person goes through their life to get rid of all the physical garbage, like thankfully print pornography is pretty out of style, so that's not usually a problem. But there's all kinds of other things like clothing, like immodest clothing, especially for women, but also for guys, especially these days, which is just so weird. But also, anything that a person owns that you're gonna get, if you're gonna get rid of it, don't donate it. At least, if you're gonna get rid of it because it's not kosher for anyone, like it's against the Torah, like if it's not modest or it's leads someone to sin, you don't want to donate it to someone else so that they can potentially commit sins with it. It has to be physically destroyed, like smashed, cut up, burnt, thrown in the garbage, so that no one else will, you know, so you don't lay stumbling blocks before the blind. That's one of the reasons why I smashed the TV. Because I didn't want anyone else to watch horrible things on it. Whether it was pornography or just the news, they're still both pretty horrible. The other reason was for just for attention, because I'm kind of a Balgaiva, Balgava. I'm a master of arrogance. But another thing we shouldn't give to other people is like things that damage the body physically, like drugs or alcohol or tobacco. So that's one thing I have to do, is I have to like get rid of all the tobacco that I have. Baruch Hashem, I have not smoked for over a week. Not smoked cigarettes anyway. I'm not sure if I'd ever be able to quit smoking after I started again. At least on my own, I guess I should say, without having some kind of a physical condition where I just couldn't or didn't want to smoke. No, we can't have a connection with speech because she ate the fruit. It is possible that we may have a connection with sound, though. The sages say that a woman's voice is like her nakedness. No, a man shouldn't listen to a woman's voice that's not his wife, especially if she sings. If he wants to not waste seed, or eventually be drawn to commit sins. See, a lot of people hear things like that and they think, man, those guys are just extremist. It's like the Jewish version of Sharia law. A person can say or think whatever they want. The truth is, these are the wisest people in history, and objectively, if a person looks at history and the behaviors of almost every human being, the people that don't put up these kinds of fences and acknowledge that these are, these are laws of creation, that if they aren't if a person isn't aware of them and constantly vigilant, they will become, subject to their forces of attraction and repulsion. It really all depends on 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 if you really want as good a connection with the creator of the worlds as you can possibly have. Are you going to not do something? Are you going to, at least if you can do it, are you going to not do it? I mean, for myself personally, nothing else matters. Because through that connection, anything that is good and really important and true becomes clear and important as well. And anything that isn't becomes not just undesirable or uninteresting, it becomes disgusting. Person has to follow the roadmap if they want to get home. And as close to one piece as possible. Or even, even if that is not your primary or even any concern, you don't care about what happens to your own self. A person has to realize that if they don't do these things for every, especially the intentional errors, and that, those include errors and sins and transgressions that a person makes that are, so-called unintentional, if they didn't learn to know the difference of what is good and what is evil, what creates worlds and what destroys them. Because it's not just, a person's own eternal fate that they that their actions make or break. It's literally the fate of the entire world. World down here, as well as causing either peace or chaos in the worlds above. I learned something recently from Rav Yaron Rubin that definitely reinforced my recommendation to not read any kind of old mystical manuscripts or things like that, and try to do any of that stuff. But specifically Kabbalah, was that my inclination was that, how could a person know that those things were copied and printed accurately, either as how the author intended them or whatnot. But what he said is they actually have intentional errors in them, and it's so people won't hurt themselves doing something that they're definitely not ready for and shouldn't be doing at all. As the real deep Kabbalah, like this stuff in those weird old manuscripts of Hebrew with like weird circle writings and like different shapes and stuff. The guys that did that were like way way out there as far as their level. And the only people that do that now that are even close to that, as far as really understanding anything, they don't have YouTube channels, and they don't write books, and they don't do like public speaking engagements. The whole thing about real Kabbalah is it can only be given over like in person between one person to another. So anything that gets conveyed like in a book or online is either pretty basic uh, or full of lots of flaws. The other thing you mentioned was I kind of, you know, I kind of wish I didn't hear it, because then I wouldn't have the temptation to do it. But I won't. I won't give it over. But said it was how a person could get real irat shamayim, real fear of heaven, which just that concept in itself is combined with the meditative aspect of what he said. If anyone really knows what all those things mean, it should terrify the hell out of them to I mean, maybe that's not what would happen, or maybe it wouldn't be that severe. Maybe it would be each person in their own level, and what is appropriate. but it's hard to say how. I'm scared. I know that much. I have enough fear of heaven to be afraid. He also said in one of his older shirim in the Jewish Hashkafa series that, so many people talk about, God is love and all that stuff. And I mean, sure, that's one aspect of God, that people who are wholly righteous and have ascended the ladder in the proper order, they perceive that and nothing else, because they see everything he does as love, as good. But to get to that level, you have to start as just being absolutely terrified of not breathing, not not being healthy, of being, crippled or sick, or not waking up the next day, or getting in a car accident, or having your loved ones die because of all the horrible things that you've done in life to deserve all that and so much more. And then he said, that's the very base level. The highest level of fear of heaven, of fearing God, is where you fear severing the connection that you made with him. Like a person fears damaging their relationship with their wife that they truly love. So they do everything they possibly can to make sure that doesn't happen. But still, still that is fear of heaven. That's not really to love God. That's, I mean, it's the very beginning of loving God. But only after you go through all those other stages of fear to get to that point, then and only then can you start to really love God. Thanks, BV. I'll do my best to stay quit. It'll be nice to have some to not have to spend so much money on killing myself slowly. Hopefully I can put it to better use towards living, really living, and helping other people to live also, with a great deal of his help, as always. It's interesting that you're a butcher, Lee, or Le. The the sages say that that's one of the occupations that a person can do, or one example they give of how a person can turn their nature that a lot of people perceive as evil towards good. And there are many, many different ways, but every person has to take whatever that they're naturally inclined to desire, that that they would most reflexively use for evil, like a lust for blood. You know, to take that desire and shift it from wanting to murder someone into being a, the sages use a kosher slaughter, obviously, yeah. But for the goyim, it'd be like any slaughter, or being a doctor and healing people, stopping the blood rather than letting it flow by murdering someone. That's our purpose here, is to take all those desires that we have that we think are can only be used for something evil or something that goes against the Torah, and doing everything we can to search out a way to use them for, at least for good, somehow. A person really succeeds if they can find a way to use them for holiness, to fulfill his will. In most ways, I think we most of the time we disappoint, but he knows that we're all people, and it's really hard down here in these bodies because he made it that way. But a person just has to keep trying. Don't let the failures suck you into the hole that the Satan wants to drag you into. You gotta claw your way back out. And if you really keep trying and put as much effort into it as you can, as much as you can muster, and you just stick with it, the failures will be less severe and less often. And you'll keep, it's a constant tug of war, or like elevation and dissension. But if a person keeps at it, the dips are, get less often, less severe, and the overall result is like it's like the stock market for the last 14 years. It's an upward trajectory. Not that those two are, even remotely close to the same thing. That's another thing I learned lately, is the Hebrew word lahavdil, to separate or to make a distinction. And it's definitely important when a person is talking about, stupid, nonsensical, secular topics, or that relate to, mundane life. And making its distinction between, those things in the Torah, because they're not even in the same world, quite literally. It's good for a person to be, if you're not worried about disappointing God, you're really not in a good place. Person just can't let that fear overwhelm them to where they don't do anything. Just pick something, whittle it away, shave off. Try not to lie. That's one thing that the sages say is probably the most important thing that you can do is if you just focus with all your might on not lying, a person will keep the rest of the Torah by itself, by themselves, just from focusing on not lying. Because so many other sins are born out of lying. You just gotta learn, gotta do. Set reasonable, achievable goals, and always keep adding to them as often as you can, and never give up. It's cold out here, and I need to get some sleep so that God can heal my body and my mind. If it is His will, I just have to do my effort. The rest is up to Him. Thank you for your help. I pray He grants us all the help to show us our mistakes early and often, and the strength to face them and do teshuvah. Only through a great deal of His mercy and kindness. And I hope He has mercy on His kids. I'll talk to you guys soon. Shun evil, do good, and refine your midot. It's the only way. You gotta learn how, though. Learn real Torah.